Hello everyone and welcome back. The FBI keeps files on cases so disturbing they're rarely discussed outside the Bureau's walls, but some killers don't make headlines because they operate in silence, crossing state lines, leaving bodies in their wake, getting closer to their hunters than anyone imagines. Tonight, we're opening 3 classified case files from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. From a serial killer obsessed with a ghost that never existed, to a business owner who hid murder behind a mob narrative, these are the stories that reveal how close evil can get before we see it. One woman escaped from a basement at 15. One bridal shop owner was stabbed 331 times by someone she trusted. And one FBI agent discovered that the monster she was hunting had watched her sleep for 20 years. Before we dive in, I want to hear from you. What's the most disturbing true crime story that's ever stayed with you? Drop it in the comments below. If you love these kinds of cases, please hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and keeps bringing you the darkest files the FBI has ever solved. Now turn off the lights, lock your doors, and let's begin. Story 1. I still remember the smell of that interrogation room. Coffee gone cold, the metallic tang of fear sweat and something else, charcoal. The kind artists use for sketching. My name is Emilia Rhodes, Special Agent FBI Cold Case Unit. They call me the camera behind my back, sometimes to my face when they're feeling generous. Photographic memory, eidetic recall. Whatever you want to call the curse of remembering everything you've ever seen with perfect clarity. I've been with the Bureau for 23 years, joined when I was 25, fresh out of the foster system, carrying more scars than credentials. My mother was a junkie who abandoned me when I was 9, dropped me at a gas station in Canton, Ohio, told me to wait in the bathroom, and never came back. I spent my teenage years bouncing between homes, sleeping on couches, learning how to fight and how to disappear. When I was 17, a man cornered me behind a bar in Youngstown, tried to sexually assault me in an alley that smelled like piss and rotting garbage. I fought back, broke a bottle across his face and ran until my lungs burned. That night, bleeding and shaking in a bus station bathroom, I made myself a promise. I would never be powerless again. I would save the women I could have become. The Bureau took me because I was relentless, because I could look at a crime scene once and recite every detail 6 months later, because I didn't quit. It was November 2024 when they brought Jason Vance in. I was in the Louisville field office working a stack of cold cases from the 90s when my supervisor called me into his office. "We've got something weird, Emilia," old transient picked up at a motel in Kentucky, interrupted strangling a sex worker. His hands cramped up, arthritis, couldn't finish the job. She got away. I didn't see what was weird about that until he showed me the notebook. Small spiral-bound thing, grease-stained cover, found in Vance's jacket pocket during the pat-down. Inside were drawings, dozens of them, charcoal sketches of women's faces, rendered with disturbing accuracy. The arresting officer recognized one of the faces, a Jane Doe found 3 months prior in his previous county. DNA tied Vance to 3 cold case strangulations in Los Angeles from the early 90s. That's when they called me. I drove to the county lockup that afternoon. Vance was 78 years old, gaunt and stooped, with massive hands swollen at the knuckles. Arthritis had turned his weapons into useless clubs. He'd been a day labourer, a drifter, invisible in the landscape of highway rest stops and cheap motels for 5 decades. But something about his face felt familiar. Not sure how, not sure when. I generally don't forget faces if I've looked at someone carefully, even once. That's what makes me valuable to the Bureau. But my memory failed me this time. I pushed the feeling aside, told myself it was just the generic weathered look of every transient I'd ever interviewed. They all started to blend together after a while. The interrogation started at 6 p.m. I sat across from him in that small room with its one-way mirror and ancient recording equipment. He was rubbing his knuckles, wincing at the pain. "I need you to help me understand your work," I said. "That's how you approach men like this. You don't accuse, you invite." He looked up at me, and his eyes lit up like I'd offered him a gift. He asked for his art supplies. The attending officer brought in the notebook and a fresh box of charcoal pencils we'd approved. What Vance did next was methodical. He didn't draw chronologically. He drew geographically. He took me on a tour of America, state by state, victim by victim. He started in California, moved through Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico. Each sketch was a trophy. Each face was a woman who trusted the wrong stranger, accepted the wrong ride, stayed in the wrong room. He wasn't confessing, he was showing off. This was his gallery opening, and I was his audience. I kept my voice steady, professional, took notes, documented everything. The California victims from the 80s and 90s, the Nevada victims, moving east through the Southwest. By the time he reached Texas, we'd been at it for 4 hours. 79 women. 81 faces rendered in charcoal with an artist's care for detail. Then he paused, looked at me with a strange smile. "Let's go north, Agent. Let's go to the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Ohio. That's your neck of the woods, isn't it?" I felt my stomach tighten. "Good guess," I said. "Is it?" he asked. He started drawing women from Ohio, from Pennsylvania, from the back roads and truck stops of the region where I grew up. I watched each face emerge from the page. 82, 85, 90. Then he stopped. He was still drawing, but he wasn't showing them anymore. He kept the sketches close, protective, like they were more personal, more valuable. I could see his expression changing. He was enjoying this, enjoying the shift in my breathing, the tension in my shoulders that I couldn't quite hide. Finally, he slid 3 drawings across the metal table, face up, deliberate. The first one made my vision blur. It was a woman with sad eyes and a distinctive scar through her left eyebrow. The scar left by my abusive father, who'd beaten her one night when I was 6, then left us 3 months later for his 19-year-old girlfriend. That scar was the reason she started using, the reason she couldn't look in the mirror without seeing his fists, the reason she picked up a needle and never put it down. Older than I remembered her, more worn down, but unmistakable. My mother. She was one of the firsts in the Rust Belt, Vance said quietly. Number 43, I think. Picked her up on Route 30 outside of Canton, hitchhiking. Talkative junkie. When I took her to the woods, she just cried a lot. About a daughter. He leaned forward, studying my face. The resemblance is striking, Agent Rhodes. Same eyes, same bone structure. Isn't she your mother? I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. 23 years of training, of professionalism, of control, and I couldn't form words. He chuckled softly. Well, isn't that something? Looks like I met the family a long time ago. I don't know how long I sat there staring at that sketch, at the face of the woman who'd abandoned me, who I'd spent years hating and missing in equal measure, the woman I'd told myself I didn't care about finding. Vance slid the second drawing forward. This one I recognized immediately. Victim found in a drainage ditch outside of Mansfield, Ohio, in 2002. My first major case as a rookie agent. And all of a sudden, I knew exactly where I'd seen him before and why he looked familiar. The diner. Route 42. The man in the next booth, the rough hands holding the pepper shaker I'd given him. The work jacket. The newspaper. The quiet amusement in his eyes as he listened to me argue with Harris about a killer I couldn't catch. 22 years had passed. He'd aged, lost weight. The arthritis had twisted his hands. But it was him. The same eyes, the same weathered face I'd dismissed as generic just hours ago. The memory came flooding back with perfect clarity. I was 26, ambitious, hungry to prove myself. And I just profiled the killer as a transient manual labourer. My supervisor, Agent Harris, thought I was reaching. We'd argued about it in a diner off Route 42. I was loud, frustrated, convinced I was right but unable to prove it. Harris was cautious, methodical, unwilling to commit resources based on a hunch. I remember someone asking me to pass the pepper. I looked up at a man in the next booth, rough hands, calloused, wearing a work jacket. He was eating pie, reading a newspaper. I'd looked right at him, and something in my gut had screamed. But I dismissed it, passed him the pepper, turned back to my argument with Harris. I heard every word, Agent, Vance said now, watching my face as the realization crashed over me like ice water. You were loud, you were passionate, you were right about the profile, but you were too busy fighting your boss to see who was sitting 3 feet away. His ego and your arrogance, that's what saved me that day. Every detail was crystal clear now. The diner's checkered floor, the smell of burnt coffee, Harris's dismissive expression, and the man in the next booth, holding the pepper shaker I'd just handed him, watching us with quiet amusement. I crumpled my notes that night, walked out of the diner feeling defeated and useless. The third drawing was different. It showed the interior of a cheap motel room from an unusual angle, low, looking in from where the window would be. The perspective of someone standing outside, peering in. The drawing showed a bed, rumpled covers, and me, younger, lying on top of the covers in a tank top but no underwear, hair messy, asleep. My stomach dropped. That was a weird sleep behaviour I'd had in my younger days. Too hot for blankets, too exhausted to care about modesty when I was alone. Something I'd grown out of by my 30s. Something no one should know about. Something I'd never told anyone. He had drawn me. Not just my face or my general form. He'd drawn me in intimate detail. The exact position I slept in. The way my hair fanned across the pillow. The specific tank top I'd worn that night. White with a small tear near the hem. Details only someone who'd been there, who'd watched for long enough to memorize every detail, would know. That was the night after the diner. Argument. I'd gone back to my motel room defeated, ready to quit the bureau in the morning. I'd felt small, dismissed, like I was wasting my time chasing ghosts while real women died. I'd fallen asleep around midnight, woke up gasping around 2 a.m., heart pounding, drenched in sweat. I'd had the nightmare again, the one about the alley, about being 17, about the man with the broken bottle embedded in his face, reaching for me anyway. But when I woke up, it wasn't just the nightmare. I'd felt eyes on me. Felt it so strongly I'd sat up, scanned the room, checked the locks, looked out the window. Saw nothing. Told myself it was PTSD. Told myself I was safe. Told myself I was being paranoid. I'd forced myself to lie back down, said out loud to the empty room, "You are not powerless. You are strong. You will not quit." I stayed with the bureau because of that night, because I refused to let fear win. Vance slid his blackened fingernail across the edge of the drawing, a possessive gesture that made my skin crawl. "I followed you from the diner, Agent Rhodes, followed your car to that motel, watched you go into your room. I stood on the air conditioning unit outside your window, watched you undress, watched you fixing your hair, gathering your things, watched you walk into the bathroom. I moved to the bathroom window gap and watched you take that shower. Watched you come out of the shower naked, hair still wet, dripping water on the tile. Then you dried off and put on that tank top and collapsed on the bed." He started caressing his finger slowly across the drawing, tracing the outline of my sleeping form. He continued, his voice soft and intimate. "You were thinking about me, you know, about the profile, about the killer you couldn't catch. I watched you for over an hour, and for the first time in my life, I wanted to get caught." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I wanted you to find me. Only you, because you understood. You saw what I was, even when you were looking right past me. And if you'd turned your head that night, if you'd seen me at that window, I would have killed you exactly like I killed your mother. Same way, same hands around your throat. Would have been poetic, don't you think? The room was silent except for the hum of the recording equipment. Vance gathered the 3 sketches and stacked them neatly. He looked at me with an expression that made my skin crawl. Something between affection and hunger. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time, you know. He placed his palm flat on the drawing of me sleeping, covering it possessively. You've grown a lot, changed. But I still remember you exactly as I saw you that night. Naked, wet hair, water dripping down your back, down your butt, pooling on the bathroom tile. The way you curled on your side when you slept, one hand tucked under the pillow. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. I've dreamt about you for so long, Emilia. In those dreams, I confessed to you, told you everything, every face, every name I could remember, every road where I left them. It felt nice to get it all off my chest, to finally tell someone who would understand. He leaned forward, his swollen hands pressed flat on the table. And then, in those dreams, I killed you. So many times. With my bare hands. The same way I killed your mother. The same way I would have killed you that night if you hadn't woken up like a predator instead of prey. When I saw you enter this room today, when I looked up and saw your face, I knew. He smiled, genuine and warm, like he was greeting an old friend. I knew this was going to be my day, the day I finally get to confess to you for real, the day I finally get to show you my work, my gallery. All these years I've been carrying you with me, Emilia, and now here you are, sitting across from me, listening, just like in my dreams. He paused, studying my face. Except this time, I don't get to kill you at the end, do I? This time, you get to walk away, and I have to live with that. I looked at him across that table, at the monster who'd killed my mother, who'd watched me sleep, who'd walked free because I was too proud to trust my instincts. How many? I asked. My voice sounded hollow. How many women died because I handed you the pepper and walked away? He thought about it, a small smile playing at his lips. After that night, before arthritis slowed me down. He counted on his swollen fingers. 28, maybe 30. I lost count around 2010. They all started blending together. 30 women. 30 faces I'd never see except in the sketches he'd draw later. 30 lives that ended because I'd been too busy arguing to listen to the voice in my head screaming danger. And how many total? I forced the words out. He tilted his head, considering. 96, give or take. Some I didn't sketch, some I don't remember clearly, but around 96 over 40 years. I stood up, walked out of the interrogation room, locked myself in the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left. Vance was convicted on 19 counts of first-degree murder. DNA evidence tied him to 31 more. His sketches and confessions documented another 46 cases across 20 states, 96 women total, 96 mothers, daughters, sisters, friends who got into the wrong car, accepted the wrong offer, crossed paths with the wrong drifter on the wrong night. He's serving life without parole in a federal supermax facility. He still draws, sends me sketches sometimes. Women I've never seen. Women whose cases we haven't connected yet. Women who are still Jane Does in filing cabinets across the country. I keep every drawing he sends, add them to the wall in my office, study them until I can recite every detail, every shadow, every stroke of charcoal. Then I go looking for them, for their families, for some kind of answer to give the people who've spent years wondering where their daughter, their sister, their mother went. I found my mother's body 6 months after Vance's confession. Shallow grave off Route 30, exactly where he said it would be. She'd been in the ground for 38 years. I buried her in Canton, next to the grandmother I barely remembered, put her name on a headstone, Natalie Rhodes, 1960 to 1986, beloved mother. I don't know if that's true. Don't know if she ever really loved me, or if the drugs loved her more. But I wanted it to be true, needed it to be true. Agent Harris came to the funeral. He'd retired 3 years earlier, moved to Florida, but he drove up when he heard about the case, about Vance, about the diner. I visited my mother's grave a week later, just standing there trying to feel something other than hollow. That's when Harris found me. He stood beside me for a long time, both of us looking at that fresh headstone, before he spoke. I heard about what happened in the interrogation, he said quietly, about the drawings, about that night at the motel. I didn't respond, didn't trust my voice. Emilia, I need you to hear this. He turned to face me. I knew back then that you were going to be a great agent. That instinct of yours, that fire, it's what makes you exceptional. But my job was to keep you grounded in reality, to teach you that instinct alone isn't enough. We need evidence. We need proof. He paused, his hand resting on the headstone. It's not your fault. It's not my fault either. What happened that day in the diner, it was just a coincidence. A terrible, cruel coincidence. We didn't have enough information apart from your instinct and the profile. Everything was circumstantial. We couldn't have arrested him. Couldn't have stopped him. Not with what we had. I know, I said. My voice came out rough. I know that logically, but... Don't let him get into your head, Harris interrupted. That's what he wants. That's why he told you. That's why he showed you those drawings. He wants you to carry his work with you, to make you part of his story. Don't give him that power. I understood what he meant. I'd been dealing with the guilt since the interrogation, replaying that moment in the diner over and over, wondering if I'd looked harder, listened better, pushed Harris more forcefully. But Harris was right. We'd had nothing but my gut feeling and a profile that fit 1,000 transient labourers across the country. No judge would have signed a warrant. No prosecutor would have filed charges. Logic understood that. But grief and guilt don't care about logic. I still work cold cases, still chase ghosts through filing cabinets and evidence lockers, still carry that moment in the diner, that night in the motel room, the weight of 30 women who'd still be alive if I'd trusted myself. Sometimes late at night, when I'm alone in my apartment, I think about Vance standing outside my window, his hand on the glass, watching me undress, watching me shower, watching me sleep, planning what he'd do. He still sends me sketches, not just of his other victims, but of me, of that night in the motel, drawings of me naked in various positions, different angles of my body as I slept, imagined scenes of what he wanted to do, what he dreamed about doing. I don't keep those like I keep his portraits of the other victims. I refuse to think of myself as a victim, refuse to let him put me on that wall with the women he actually killed. So I burn them, every single one. Take them out to my apartment's small balcony, hold a lighter to the corner and watch the charcoal lines curl and blacken and turn to ash. He knows I burned them. I told him once in a response letter thinking it might stop him. It didn't. If anything, he sends them more frequently now. Like it's a game. Like he's testing how many times he can make me relive that night. Make me stand on my balcony with a lighter in my hand, refusing to be his victim. And I think about waking up. About that moment of pure animal awareness that saved my life. About choosing to stay with the Bureau instead of quitting. I don't know if I made the right choice. Don't know if the women I've saved since then balance the scales against the ones I missed. But I know this. I know that evil is patient. Know that it watches and waits and finds the cracks in your armour. Know that it's been closer to you than you think, closer than you want to believe. And I know that the only thing standing between the monster and the victim is someone willing to look at the rough hands holding the pepper shaker and listen when their gut screams run. I wish I'd listened sooner. I wish a lot of things. But wishing doesn't bring anyone back. doesn't change the past, doesn't erase the drawings on my wall or the nightmares that wake me at 2 a.m., heart pounding, searching the shadows for the face I saw once in a diner and ignored. All I can do is keep looking, keep searching, keep pulling Jane Does out of shallow graves and giving them their names back, keep making sure that when the next monster passes me the pepper, I don't just hand it back and walk away. Story 2. The difference between a romance and a kidnapping is often just the lock on the door. I learned that when I was 15 years old in Ruston, Louisiana. I had to teach it to a girl named Ivy Chamberlain 16 years later in Washington State. My name is Gemma Hollis, and I'm a special agent with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. This is the story of how I survived a monster so I could save someone else from becoming his echo. It was September 2008. I was 15, living with my parents on a small property outside Ruston. We had 3 acres of nothing special, just scrub grass and a chain-link fence that needed painting every 2 years. That Tuesday, I was out there with a brush and a can of white paint, working my way along the posts, listening to music on my headphones, daydreaming about nothing in particular. I wasn't popular at school. I wasn't unpopular either. I was just there, invisible in the comfortable way that bookish kids learn to be. I read romance novels, where mysterious strangers turned out to be princes in disguise, where being chosen meant being special, where love arrived like lightning and changed everything. When the man walked up our gravel drive that afternoon, he looked like he'd stepped out of one of those paperbacks. He was maybe 30 years old, tall and fit, with dark hair and a face that belonged on a movie poster. He wore jeans and a clean button-down shirt, and when he smiled at me, it was shy and apologetic in a way that made my 15-year-old heart skip. His truck had broken down about a quarter-mile back, he said. His phone was dead. He was so sorry to bother me, but could he possibly use our landline to call for a tow? His voice was smooth, melodic, the kind of voice that made you want to keep listening. I should have gone inside and gotten my mother. I should have told him to wait by the road. But I didn't want to be the scared little girl. I wanted to be the helpful heroine from my books, the one who extended kindness to strangers and was rewarded with adventure. So I said yes and started walking toward the house, but then he stopped, patted his pockets, and gave an apologetic laugh. "Oh man, I'm an idiot. I left my insurance card and the tow company number in my truck. Let me grab those real quick so I have them when I call. Would you mind walking back with me? I don't want to lose you and have to find the house again." The way he said, "I don't want to lose you," made something flutter in my chest, even though I knew he just meant the directions. It sounded like something a boy would say in one of my books, right before everything changed. So I smiled and walked with him back down the drive. We talked as we went. He asked about school, about my family, about the book I'd been reading that morning. He'd seen it on the porch. He knew the author, loved her work. He made me feel seen in a way I'd never felt before, like I was the most interesting person he'd met in years. His name was Todd Klingman, though I wouldn't learn that until later. At the time, he was just the handsome stranger who made me feel special. When we reached his truck, it was parked on the shoulder, an older model Chevy that looked perfectly functional. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door, gesturing inside. He said the insurance card was in the glove box. Could I just grab it for him because his hands were dirty from checking the engine? It was such obvious bait. But I was 15 and flattered and naive, so I leaned in to look. That's when he turned that beautiful smile on me one last time and said, "You really are perfect, Corinne." The name didn't register as wrong, not immediately. Then I felt the cold metal against my neck, heard the sharp crack of electricity, and the world went white. My muscles seized, I couldn't scream, I couldn't move, I just collapsed into his arms like a puppet with cut strings. When I came to senses, I was in total darkness. The air was hot and stale, tasting of plastic and motor oil. I was on my side, knees pulled up to my chest, unable to fully extend my legs. The surface beneath me was hard and slightly curved. I could feel the vibration of an engine, the jostle of tires over rough road. I tried to scream, but my throat was raw and tight with panic. I beat my fists against the walls surrounding me, but they were solid, unyielding. I was in some kind of container, something big enough to hold me, but small enough to be transported. A storage bin, maybe. Industrial strength. The panic came in waves, each one threatening to drown me. I was going to die in this box, and no one would ever know what happened to me. My parents would think I ran away. They'd search for years and never find me because I'd be buried in a shallow grave, or dumped in a river with weights tied to my ankles. Every horror story I'd ever read came flooding back, and I understood with terrible clarity that I'd walked straight into one. But I couldn't afford to break down. Not yet. So I focused on something, anything, to keep my mind from shattering. My hands were searching the darkness, feeling every inch of the space around me. That's when I found it. A raised pattern on the interior wall. Letters and numbers embossed into the plastic during manufacturing. I traced them with my fingertips over and over. KOBALT-BATCH- 409-TXKO-BALT-BATCH-409-TX. I said it in my head like a prayer, like a lifeline. It was proof that this box had been made somewhere by someone, for some purpose. It was real. I was real. I was still alive. The truck drove for what felt like hours, but might have been less. Time loses meaning in the dark. Eventually we stopped. I heard the engine cut off, heard his footsteps on gravel, heard metal scraping as he unlatched something. Then blinding light flooded in as he lifted the lid. I tried to fight. I swung at him with everything I had. But my muscles were still weak from the stun gun, and he was so much stronger. He grabbed my wrists and yanked me out of the box, half carrying, half dragging me across a parking lot. We were behind some kind of building, industrial and abandoned. An old auto shop, maybe. The windows were covered with plywood. No one was around. No one to hear me scream. He took me down a set of concrete stairs into a basement that smelled of oil and rust, and something worse. Something sweet and rotten that I didn't want to identify. The space had been prepared. Soundproofing foam covered the walls. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling. In the centre of the room was a steel support column, and chained to it was a thin mattress, stained dark, with God knows what. He shoved me down onto it and locked a handcuff around my left wrist, securing the other end to a ring welded into the column. Then he stepped back and looked at me, really looked at me, and the mask came off. The shy, apologetic smile was gone. What replaced it was cold and clinical, like a scientist examining a specimen. He crouched down to my level and brushed a strand of hair out of my face with a gentleness that made my skin crawl. "You look just like her," he said softly. "Same eyes, same hair. You could be her sister." I didn't know who he was talking about. I just wanted him to stop touching me. "Please," I whispered, "please let me go. I won't tell anyone. I promise." He frowned, and the disappointment in his expression was worse than anger. That's not what Corinne would say. Corinne doesn't beg. She's brave. She's gentle. She understands. That was the first time I understood. He wasn't seeing me. He was seeing someone else. Someone who wasn't here. Someone who maybe didn't exist anymore. I was just a stand-in, an understudy trying to play a role I'd never auditioned for, and every time I failed to deliver the right lines, I'd be punished. What happened over the next 14 hours is hard to talk about even now. I've spent years in therapy, learning to say the words without breaking. But the details matter, not for shock value, but because hiding them gives him power. So here's the truth. Todd Klingman stripped me naked and chained me to that post like an animal. He didn't just assault me, he directed me. It was a performance, and I was playing the part of a girl named Corinne who apparently never cried, never screamed, never fought back. Every time I did any of those things, he'd hit me. Not hard enough to knock me out, but hard enough to teach me. He'd whisper corrections like a disappointed director. "That's not like you, Corinne. Corinne is quiet. Corinne is sweet. Why are you making this so difficult?" He held me down and shaved a section of my hair near my left temple because Corinne's part was on the left, he said, and mine was on the right. He was correcting me like I was a doll with a manufacturing defect. When I defiantly called myself by my real name, Gemma, he burned my shoulder with a lit cigarette to cauterize the word out of my vocabulary. He raped me, not with passion or even anger, but with cold, entitled precision, looking past my eyes at something or someone standing just behind me. And the whole time, he kept talking to her, to Corinne, telling her how much he missed her, how long he'd been searching for her, how grateful he was that she'd finally come back. Most people think trauma breaks you instantly, like a bone snapping under pressure. But that's not how it works. Around hour 11, while I was shivering on that filthy mattress, my fear finally burned out. It didn't go away. It transformed into something harder, something sharper. I looked at the cigarette burn on my shoulder, at the blood on my thighs, at the chains around my wrist, and I made a promise to the girl Todd Klingman was trying to kill. I promised her that I wasn't going to be Corinne. Whoever she was gone. But I was still here. I was still Gemma Hollis. And I was going to walk out of this, basement or die trying. That shift saved my life. I stopped crying and started watching. I memorized the rhythm of his breathing, the pattern of his movements. I noticed he had a slight limp in his right leg, like an old injury that never healed properly. I saw where he kept the handcuff key, on a ring clipped to his belt loop. I noticed he got tired around 4 a.m., his eyes drooping, his reaction slower. I wasn't waiting to be rescued anymore. I was waiting for him to make a mistake. He made it at 4:15 a.m. He handcuffed my left wrist to a radiator pipe across the room so he could shower upstairs without worrying I'd escape the centre post. He thought one cuff was enough. He didn't know I had double-jointed thumbs, a party trick I'd used since I was a kid to gross out my friends. I dislocated my left thumb, biting down on my other hand to keep from screaming, and slipped the cuff. For a moment, I just sat there, free but frozen, unable to believe it had worked. Then I heard the water turn on upstairs and I moved. I was naked and freezing, so I scrambled to a pile of laundry in the corner. I grabbed the first things I could find, a yellow t-shirt and a pair of oversized jeans. As I pulled the jeans on, I noticed they were stiff in places, dark stains that had dried into the denim. Blood. Not mine. The shirt had a small hole in the chest that had been crudely stitched with fishing line. I realized with sick, certain horror that I was wearing the trophies of the girls who never left. The other failed Corinne's. I was standing in a dead girl's clothes. The only way out was a small ventilation window near the ceiling, maybe 2 feet square. I stacked an old crate and a folding chair and climbed up, pushing the window open. It hadn't been opened in years. The hinges screamed. I froze, listening, but the shower was still running upstairs. I squeezed through head first, tearing the skin on my back and shoulders as I wiggled through. I dropped 6 feet onto gravel outside and hit hard, knocking the wind out of myself. I'd just started to stand when I heard the shower cut off. Then I heard him bellow my name. Not Gemma, Corinne. He thought I was her even in his rage. I heard him running, heavy footsteps pounding through the building. I dove into a pile of rotting drywall and construction debris in the neighbouring lot and buried myself under it. Seconds later, a flashlight beam swept over the pile. He was standing 10 feet away, breathing hard, scanning the darkness. I held my breath until my lungs burned, until black spots danced in my vision. He stood there for 2 full minutes, and I swear he was looking right at me. But he didn't see me. Finally, he cursed and ran back inside, probably thinking I'd made it to the street. I waited another 5 minutes, then crawled out and ran. I made it to the highway and flagged down a poultry truck heading north. The driver was an older man named Amos Petway, and when he saw me, barefoot and bloody in a dead, girl's clothes, he didn't ask questions. He just called 911 and wrapped me in a blanket from behind his seat. The Louisiana State Police arrived within 10 minutes. At the precinct, they were skeptical at first. I was a runaway, they thought, or a girl who'd gotten in over her head with a boyfriend. But I gave them everything I had. I told them about the box, about the basement, about the clothes, and I recited the code I'd memorized in the dark. Cobalt-batch-409-TX. They ran the clothes. The DNA came back as Inez Robles, a missing girl from Texas, last seen in 2006. The case file was 2 years cold. Suddenly the room filled with federal agents. The FBI took jurisdiction within hours. They asked me questions for days. I told them everything. Described the basement, the building, the truck. Todd Klingman's face. An artist drew a composite sketch that looked exactly like him. They sent units to search the area where I'd escaped, but Klingman was gone. He'd cleaned out, fast, taking his go bag and leaving almost nothing behind. But they found the box, the cobalt storage bin, just like I described, sitting in the back of an abandoned truck 3 blocks from the auto shop. Inside were zip ties, duct tape, and 5-gallon jugs of hydrofluoric acid. The forensics team explained it to me later, though I wish they hadn't. Hydrofluoric acid is one of the few substances that can dissolve human bone, and the cobalt bin I'd been transported in was made of high-density polyethylene, one of the only plastics resistant to that specific acid. Todd Klingman hadn't bought that box to move me, he'd bought it to erase me. They caught him 4 days later. He'd made it to the Texas border, but fatigue made him sloppy. He stopped at a gas station and used a credit card under a stolen name. The name belonged to Inez Robles, the girl whose jeans I'd been wearing. The system flagged it immediately. A SWAT team intercepted him on Interstate 20 near Longview. He tried to ram the blockade, but they used a pursuit intervention technique and sent his truck spinning into a ditch. When they opened the truck bed, they found a fresh supply of acid canisters next to an empty cobalt bin. He'd been ready to try again. In his mugshot, he just looked small. Not monstrous, not terrifying. Just a small angry man who'd been caught. But during his interrogation, he kept saying he loved us. All of us. He said we didn't understand. We were special. We were chosen. He was just trying to bring Corinne back. The trial took 2 years. I testified when I was 17, sitting in a courtroom and recounting every detail while Todd Klingman stared at me from the defense table. He never broke eye contact. He smiled sometimes, like we were sharing a private joke. The jury convicted him on 8 counts of kidnapping and first-degree murder. They'd found remains in 3 separate locations, all dissolved beyond recognition, but linked to him through trace evidence. He got life without parole in 8 consecutive sentences. He's still alive, locked away in a federal supermax in Colorado. He writes me letters sometimes. I never open them. People ask me how I survived it, how I recovered. The truth is, you don't recover. You just learn to carry it differently. I spent years in therapy, sitting in beige rooms with kind-faced doctors, refusing to say the word victim. I told my therapist, victims are the ones who stay in the box. I'm the one who broke the lid. That distinction mattered. It still matters. I didn't dissolve in that tub. I crystallized. But there was one thing I couldn't let go. One question that haunted me. More than the scars on my shoulder or the nightmares that still wake me up at 3 a.m. Who was Corinne? Why was she the template? Why did girls have to die just because they failed to be her? When I turned 22 and graduated from the FBI Academy, I got clearance to access my own case file, and buried at the back, in a cross-reference I'd requested myself, I found her. Corinne Ashcroft, Todd Klingman's high school girlfriend from Arkansas. She'd disappeared in 1998, 2 weeks after trying to break up with him. The case was still open. still unsolved. She was 19 when she vanished. I looked just like her. Same build, same colouring, same dark hair. I was his type. I drove to Arkansas and sat with her parents in their living room. They were old now, worn down by 16 years of not knowing. I told them their daughter didn't run away. I told them she was the reason Todd Klingman killed 8 other girls. She was the standard he was trying to replicate, and every girl who failed to be her died for it. I told them I was sorry I couldn't bring her home, but at least now they knew. Her mother cried. Her father just stared at the photo I'd brought, the one from Klingman's apartment, the one he'd kept hidden under his mattress. Corinne smiling at the camera, young and alive and unaware she'd become a ghost that haunted a killer. Giving them that closure was the last lock I had to break. After that, I stopped hunting my own case and started hunting others. Men who write scripts for girls. Men who cast them in roles they never auditioned for. Men who kill them when they go off book. That's been my job for 6 years now. Most cases end quietly. An arrest, a conviction, a family that finally gets answers. But then there was Ivy Chamberlain. And Ivy's case brought me right back to that basement in Louisiana. It started in October 2024. I was assigned to the Seattle field office, working a series of parental abduction cases, when I got a call from the Cascade County Sheriff's Department. A 16-year-old girl named Ivy Chamberlain had disappeared from her high school in the foothills east of Seattle. No sign of struggle, no ransom demand. But there was surveillance footage, and the deputy who called me said I needed to see it. I drove out the same day. The sheriff, a woman named Maeve Corbett, met me in her office and pulled up the video on her computer. It showed the student parking lot at 3:30 p.m. on a Thursday. Kids were streaming out of the building, heading to their cars. Ivy Chamberlain appeared at the edge of the frame, walking alone. She was small, maybe 5'3", with long brown hair pulled into a ponytail. She wore jeans and a hoodie. She looked like 1,000 other high school girls. Then a grey sedan pulled up beside her. The driver leaned out the window. They talked for maybe 30 seconds. Then Ivy smiled. Not a scared smile, not a forced smile. A genuine, delighted smile, the kind you give someone you trust. She walked around to the passenger side, opened the door and got in. The car drove away. The whole interaction took less than a minute. Sheriff Corbett froze the frame on Ivy's face just before she got in the car. "You see that look?" she asked. I did. I'd seen it before. It was the look I'd had on my face when I walked toward Todd Klingman's truck. The selected look. The look of a girl who thought she'd been chosen for something special. "Who's the driver?" I asked. Corbett pulled up a DMV photo. Jameson Radcliffe, 46 years old. He's a history teacher at the high school. Been there for 12 years. No record, no complaints. But 3 girls have come forward since Ivy disappeared. They said he made them uncomfortable. Nothing actionable, just a vibe. I looked at the photo. Jameson Radcliffe had a kind face, the type that probably put parents at ease during conferences. He wore glasses and had greying hair. He looked like someone's dad. But I've learned that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like teachers. "He's not hiding her," I said. "He's keeping her." Corbett frowned. "What's the difference?" Everything, I thought. But I just said, "We need to find him fast." Radcliffe had disappeared the same day Ivy did. He'd called in sick to the school that morning, then vanished. His apartment was empty but neat, like he'd planned to come back. His phone was off. His credit cards hadn't been used. The initial investigation had hit a wall within 48 hours. No digital footprint, no witnesses, no leads. That's when they called me. I started where everyone starts, with the victim. Who was Ivy Chamberlain? What made her vulnerable? I spent 2 days interviewing her parents, her friends, her other teachers. The picture that emerged was familiar. Ivy was quiet, bookish. The kind of kid who ate lunch in the library and wrote poetry in notebooks she never showed anyone. Her parents were loving but distracted, both working long hours to keep. their small farm afloat. Ivy had been essentially raising herself for the past 2 years. She was lonely, and lonely girls are easy prey for men who know how to see them. I pulled Radcliffe's employment records, 12 years at Cascade High. Before that, he'd taught at 3 other schools in Oregon and Washington. I requested personnel files from all of them. 2 complaints, both from female students, both alleging inappropriate comments. Nothing serious enough to get him fired, just stern warnings and transfers. The pattern was there if you knew how to look for it. He moved every few years, always before the complaints could accumulate into something actionable, always landing at a new school where nobody knew his history. I started digging into his personal life. He lived alone, never married, no social media presence. His bank records showed modest spending, nothing unusual. But then I noticed something. Regular cash withdrawals, always $200, always on the first of the month. Cash is invisible. Cash doesn't leave a trail. So what was he spending it on? I got a warrant for his apartment and brought in a forensics team. They tore the place apart. In the back of his closet, hidden behind a false panel, they found a lockbox. Inside were library cards, 14 of them, from 14 different library systems across Washington and Oregon. Each card was registered under a different name. Each name belonged to a former student of his, girls who'd graduated years ago and probably had no idea their identities had been stolen. I sat in Radcliffe's empty apartment with those 14 library cards spread out on his kitchen table and understood. He wasn't just careful, he was methodical. He'd been planning this for years, using stolen identities to check out books, to research, to prepare, never using his own name, never leaving a traceable pattern. I divided the cards among my team and sent them out. Check every library, pull every record, find out what he was reading. It took 3 days. My partner, an agent named Cole Brixton, was the one who found it. Pierce County Library System. A card registered to Maya Tinsdale, one of Radcliffe's former students from 2019. Over the past 8 months, that card had checked out 23 books. All of them were about remote structures, abandoned buildings, off-grid living, architectural history of the Pacific Northwest. I pulled the list and started cross-referencing. One title appeared on 3 separate lists from 3 different library systems. Forgotten Architecture of the Pacific Northwest by Leonard Hatch. I drove to the Pierce County Library and asked to see the book. It was a large-format coffee table book, published in 1982, chronicling modernist structures built in the region during the 60s and 70s. Most of them had been demolished or abandoned. I flipped through it page by page. Midway through, I found a folded piece of paper tucked between the pages, a handwritten list in neat block, letters, 3 addresses. 2 had been crossed out. The 3rd was circled. I photographed the note and ran the addresses. The first was a demolished grain silo in eastern Washington. The second was a private residence, currently occupied. The third was listed as abandoned. The Solarium, a modernist cabin in the Cascade foothills, built in 1974 by an architect named Werner Goss as a personal retreat. The property had been abandoned since 2003 after a winter storm damaged the structure. I pulled the property records and satellite imagery. The solarium sat on a cliff edge overlooking the Stillwater River Gorge, accessible only by a decommissioned logging road. The nearest neighbour was 7 miles away. Perfect isolation. Perfect control. But there was a problem. The structural engineer's report from 2004 was attached to the file. The storm had compromised the main support beams. The building was cantilevered over a 60-foot drop, and the assessment concluded it was too dangerous to repair. Demolition had been recommended but never carried out because the owners had walked away and the county had no budget for it. The report ended with a warning in bold red text. Structure unstable. Do not enter. I assembled a tactical team, but I brought in an expert first. Darnell Reeves, a structural engineer with the Seattle Fire Department. I showed him the report and the satellite photos. He studied them for 20 minutes, then looked at me with concern. Agent Hollis, if you're thinking about going in there, you need to understand what you're dealing with. This isn't just an old building. It's a death trap. The main cantilever beam has been rotting for 20 years. Any significant impact, even just the vibration from footsteps, could trigger a collapse. If that building goes, anyone inside goes with it. 60 feet straight down, onto river rocks. So, what do you recommend? I asked. He shook his head. Best option? Don't go in. Set up a perimeter, wait them out, negotiate from a distance. I thought about Ivy Chamberlain, 16 years old, trapped in a glass box with a man who'd been planning this for years. Waiting wasn't an option. What if we have to go in? Reeves sighed. Then you go slow, you go light, no more than 2 people at a time, no running, no sudden movements, and you pray the building holds long enough to get out. We drove out at dawn, a convoy of 3 vehicles moving up that overgrown logging road at walking speed. It took us 2 hours to reach the site. When we finally saw the solarium, I understood why Radcliffe had chosen it. It was beautiful in a cold, brutal way. A rectangular glass box suspended over the gorge, supported by a single massive beam anchored into the cliff face. The walls were floor-to-ceiling windows, some cracked, some missing entirely. You could see straight through the structure from one end to the other. There were no walls, no privacy, no corners to hide in. It was transparency as control, a fishbowl prison. The team spread out, establishing a perimeter. I pulled out binoculars and scanned the interior. Through the dirty glass, I could see them. Ivy Chamberlain was sitting on a couch near the far wall, wrapped in a blanket. Her hair was down, hanging around her face. She was staring out at the river. Jameson Radcliffe was in the small kitchen area, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. As I watched, he walked over to Ivy and handed her one. She took it without looking at him. He sat down beside her, close, his hand resting on her knee. That's when I saw it. The blanket slipped slightly and I could see she was wearing only an oversized men's shirt. Nothing else. Radcliffe was fully dressed, but the intimacy of the scene was obvious. They'd been sleeping together. The evidence was unmistakable. I lowered the binoculars and felt my stomach turn. Whatever Ivy believed about her relationship with Radcliffe, whatever story he'd told her, the physical evidence was going to tell a different one. When we went in there, when we arrested him, the world would know. The compromising position, the isolated location, the teacher and his underage student. There would be no ambiguity. Reeves set up monitoring equipment, measuring the structural integrity of the building. He pulled me aside after 15 minutes. It's worse than I thought. The beam's cracked in 3 places. The building's only standing because it hasn't experienced any significant stress. But if you send a team in there, if Radcliffe fights back, if anyone runs or falls or even moves too fast, it could be enough. The whole thing could go. I radioed Corbett, explained the situation. She wanted to wait, call in a negotiator, try to talk Radcliffe out. But I was looking at Ivy through those windows, sitting in that glass cage, and I knew we didn't have time. Men like Radcliffe don't surrender. They'd rather destroy everything, including themselves, than admit defeat. If we waited, if we gave him time to think, he'd realize we were out here. And when he did, he'd have 2 choices: come out and face justice, or take Ivy with him over that cliff. I made the decision. We'd go in. But we'd go quiet. No sirens, no bullhorns, no tactical breach, just me. I'd approach alone, unarmed, through the front door like a visitor, keep it calm, keep it slow, get between Radcliffe and Ivy, then signal the team to move in. Reeves wasn't happy, neither was Corbett, but they didn't have a better plan, so they didn't stop me. I walked up to the solarium alone, feet crunching on gravel. The front door was unlocked. I opened it slowly, testing each step before committing my weight. The floor groaned under me, a low creaking that sounded like the building was sighing. Through the glass walls, I could see the gorge below, the river running dark and fast over jagged rocks. Radcliffe saw me first. He stood up fast, too fast, and I heard the support beam groan in response. "Don't move," I said quietly, showing my empty hands. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want to talk." Ivy turned, saw me, and her face went through a series of expressions I'd seen before. Confusion, recognition, fear. Not fear of me, fear of what my presence meant, that the illusion was ending, that the story was over. "You need to leave," Radcliffe said. His voice was tight, controlled. "This is private property. You're trespassing." I took another slow step inside, feeling the floor shift under my weight. "My name is Gemma Hollis. I'm with the FBI, and I'm not leaving without Ivy. She doesn't want to go? Do you, Ivy?" He looked at her, and there was something desperate in his expression. A man watching his carefully constructed world crumble. Ivy didn't answer. She just pulled the blanket tighter around herself, and I saw tears starting to track down her cheeks. "Ivy," I said, keeping my voice soft, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I know what he told you. I know he said this was special, that you were chosen, that the world wouldn't understand, but I need you to look at where you are right now." "We're fine," Radcliffe interjected. "We're happy here. We don't need your interference." I ignored him, kept my eyes on Ivy. "You're in a glass box on the edge of a cliff, Ivy. You can see out, but you can't leave. That's not love. That's a cage." "You don't know anything about us," Radcliffe snapped. The floor groaned again as he shifted his weight. Somewhere deep in the structure, I heard a crack. "Ivy," I continued, taking another careful step closer. "Do you know how old I was when a man told me I was special? 15. I believed him. I got into his truck, and he put me in a box and tried to erase me. The only difference between you and me is I didn't have anyone to tell me the truth before it was too late. So I'm telling you now. If you have to ask permission to leave, you're not in a relationship. You're in captivity." Ivy's face crumpled. "You don't understand. He loves me. We love each other." "If he loved you, would you be sitting here in the middle of nowhere, cut off from everyone you know, wearing his shirt because you don't have your own clothes?" I took another step. The support beam groaned, louder this time. Outside I could see Reeves making frantic hand signals, telling me to get out, but I couldn't, not without her. "Ivy, I need you to answer one question," I said, "and I need you to answer honestly, not for him, not for me, for yourself. If you stood up right now and walked out that door, would he let you go?" The silence stretched out. Ivy looked at Radcliffe. He looked back at her with an expression that was equal parts love and desperation, and something darker. Possession. She opened her mouth to answer, and Radcliffe moved. He grabbed her wrist, not violently, but firmly. "Don't listen to her, Ivy. She's trying to confuse you. She doesn't understand what we have." I saw Ivy flinch when he grabbed her. Just a tiny movement, but it was there. The instinctive recoil of someone who'd been held too tight too many times. And in that flinch, I saw the illusion crack. "Let go of her," I said quietly. "This is over, Radcliffe. You know it's over. The only question now is how it ends." "It doesn't end," he said. "We don't end. Tell her, Ivy. Tell her you're staying." Ivy was crying openly now, looking between us, torn between the story she'd been living and the truth standing in front of her. I don't know." "Yes, you do," I said. "You've known for a while. That's why you've been scared. That's why you flinch when he touches you. Your body knows what your mind won't admit yet. You're not safe here. You've never been safe here." Radcliffe's grip on Ivy's wrist tightened. "After everything I've done for you, after everything I've given you, you're really going to let her turn you against me?" "You didn't give her anything," I said, my voice hardening. "You stole her. You isolated her. You groomed a 16-year-old child and convinced her it was romance. And when we walk out of here, When the prosecutors lay out every text message, every private meeting, every law you broke, you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell. The only choice you have now is whether Ivy walks out of here traumatized or whether she walks out understanding she was never the problem. That you were. Ivy, Radcliffe pleaded, turning to her fully now. Don't you see what she's doing? She's trying to take you away from me, to destroy what we built together. And that's when Ivy said it, so quiet, I almost didn't hear. You didn't build this with me. You built it for me. I never had a choice. Radcliffe's face went white, then red. That's not true. You wanted this. You came willingly. Because I was 16, Ivy whispered. Because you were my teacher. Because you told me I was special and I didn't know that's what predators say. The word hung in the air. Predator. And in Radcliffe's expression, I saw the moment he realized he'd lost. Not just Ivy, not just his freedom, but the story itself. The narrative he'd constructed where he was the tragic romantic and she was his willing partner. It was crumbling, and he couldn't hold it together. He let go of Ivy's wrist and stepped back. For a moment I thought he was going to surrender, but then I saw his eyes shift toward the glass wall overlooking the gorge, and I understood. He was calculating. If he couldn't have her, no one could. If the story was ending, he'd end it his way. I moved fast, putting myself between Radcliffe and Ivy. Don't, I said. Whatever you're thinking, don't. It's over. Let it be over. You're right, he said softly. It is over. And he ran, not toward Ivy, not toward me, toward the glass wall. I screamed for him to stop, but he didn't. He hit the wall at full speed, crashed through one of the cracked panels, and disappeared over the edge. The sound of shattering glass was followed by a sickening thud from the rocks below, and then silence. Ivy screamed, a raw, broken sound that echoed through the glass box. I grabbed her, pulled her toward the door as the building shuddered. The support beam, stressed beyond its limits, let out a groan like a dying animal. Reeves was shouting from outside, waving us toward him. I half-carried, half-dragged Ivy across the floor as cracks spiderwebbed through the remaining glass. We made it to the threshold just as the beam gave way. The solarium collapsed in slow motion, the entire structure tilting and sliding toward the gorge. Glass exploded outward. The furniture tumbled through the air, and then everything disappeared over the edge in a roar of destruction that seemed to go on, forever. Ivy and I lay on the ground 20 feet from the cliff edge, covered in dust, shaking. The team rushed forward, pulled us farther back to safety. I sat up slowly, looked at where the solarium had been. There was nothing left, just a scar on the cliff face and a pile of rubble 60 feet below in the river. The recovery team found Radcliffe's body 2 hours later. He'd died on impact, crushed on the rocks along with the shattered remains of his glass prison. We wrapped Ivy in blankets, checked her for injuries. She was in shock, answering questions in a monotone, staring at nothing. But as we loaded her into the ambulance, she grabbed my hand. "Did you mean it?" she whispered. "That I wasn't the problem?" I squeezed her hand. "You were never the problem, Ivy. You were just a girl who wanted to be seen. There's nothing wrong with that. What was wrong was the man who weaponized it." The forensic sweep of the wreckage took days. They recovered Radcliffe's personal effects from the rubble, a laptop with thousands of photos of Ivy, taken without her knowledge over the course of months, a journal documenting his obsession, describing her in terms that made my skin crawl. And hidden in a waterproof container, they found the box, the one with the 12 photographs. I was there when they opened it. The photos showed girls spanning a decade, all Radcliffe students, all dark-haired and slight and quiet. On the back of each, he'd written fictional names: Emmeline, Annalisa, Magnolia, Cordelia, Beatrix, and at the bottom of the stack, the oldest photo, printed on different paper stock. A girl who looked about 13, smiling shyly at the camera. On the back, in faded ink, Corinne. My hands went numb. I ran the photo through our database. Corinne Ashcroft. The same girl Todd Klingman had been trying to resurrect. The same ghost. I pulled Radcliffe's background records and found him in the Arkansas High School yearbook from 1998, a sophomore in the same class as Corinne. He'd been interviewed briefly after her disappearance, cleared due to an alibi, but the investigators hadn't known what I knew, that sometimes the alibi isn't the point. Sometimes the alibi is just the first lie in a long chain of them. I flew to Arkansas and sat with Corinne's parents one more time. They were frailer now, aged beyond their years by grief. I showed them Radcliffe's photo. They remembered him. The quiet boy who'd had a crush on their daughter, the one who'd taken her rejection so hard. They'd never thought, but then no one ever does. We want to believe teenagers are harmless, that unrequited love is tragic but innocent. We don't see when rejection becomes resentment, when resentment becomes obsession, when obsession becomes violence. I can't prove Jameson Radcliffe killed Corinne Ashcroft, but I know he did. Radcliffe killed the girl who rejected him when he was 15, and he spent the next 26 years trying to find her again, trying to cast new girls in her role, trying to rewrite the story where she loved him back. And when Ivy finally agreed to play the part, he built her a glass stage where he could direct her every move. Ivy Chamberlain spent 3 months in a psychiatric facility, working through what Radcliffe had done to her. She had to testify in a closed hearing about the sexual relationship, had to let strangers examine the most intimate details of her trauma, had to admit out loud that she'd been groomed and assaulted and manipulated. It nearly broke her. But it didn't. She walked out of that hospital with her head high, enrolled in a new school 3 states away, and started the long process of becoming someone other than Radcliffe's victim. She writes to me sometimes, not often, just when she needs to talk to someone who understands. In her last letter, she told me she'd started dating someone her own age, a boy from her English class who made her laugh and never made her feel like she owed him anything. She said it felt different, easy, like she could breathe, like she could be herself without performing. I wrote back and told her that's what love is supposed to feel like, not like drowning, like surfacing. We identified all 11 girls in Radcliffe's photographs. Most had moved on with their lives, carrying memories they'd never quite understood until I showed up to explain them. 2 refused to speak to me outright. I didn't push. Some doors need to stay closed, but one agreed to meet. Her terms were strict, alone, off the record. Her family could never know. Her name was Leah Garrison. She was 27, living in Tacoma. When I arrived at the coffee shop she'd chosen, she was already there, sitting in the back corner, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. She looked at the photo I showed her, the one with Beatrix written on the back, and her eyes went hard. I was 15, she said. He told me I was mature for my age, special, that we had a connection other people wouldn't understand. Did he ever? Yes. Her voice was flat. 3 times, in his car after tutoring sessions. I thought I loved him. I thought it was real. I waited. Let her set the pace. I got pregnant, she said finally. I didn't tell him. I transferred schools. My parents thought I was acting out, being rebellious. They never knew why. Your son, I said quietly. She nodded. He's 11 now. Smart. Funny. The best thing that ever happened to me. Her voice cracked. But every time I look at him, I see Radcliffe's face, and I hate that. I hate that he's connected to something so beautiful. Your partner doesn't know? No. He thinks it was a high school boyfriend. I've been carrying this for 12 years, alone. And now, she looked at me, and I saw something break loose in her expression. Relief. Grief. Now someone finally knows. Someone who understands. You're one of the bravest people I've ever met, I said. She laughed, bitter. I'm a coward. I never reported him. If I had. Maybe Ivy. Don't, I said firmly. You were a child. He was the adult, the criminal. None of this is your fault. Not then. Not now, she cried. I let her. And when she was done, she said the same thing Ivy would say months later. Does it get easier? No, I told her, but you get stronger. Most people think a case closes when the perpetrator dies. They see the suicide, the conviction, the cell door slamming shut, and they assume justice is done. But for us, that's just the beginning of a different kind of work. The work of finding the ones everyone missed. The work of bringing closure to families still waiting by silent phones. The work of identifying remains that have no names. It's slow, painstaking. Sometimes it takes years to answer a single question, and the answers don't always bring peace. Sometimes they bring more pain, but at least they bring truth. And truth, however brutal, is better than the endless wondering. Only a certain kind of person can bear this weight. You have to be stronger than the grief, stronger than the rage, stronger than the voice that whispers, it's not worth it, that the dead are dead and the living need to move on. But we don't move on. We dig deeper. Sheriff Corbett called me 6 months after the solarium collapsed. She'd been going through cold cases in her jurisdiction with fresh eyes. She'd found 3 girls who'd vanished from the Cascade County area over the past 12 years. All had been students at schools where Radcliffe taught. All disappeared during summer breaks or holiday weekends. All were small, dark-haired, and quiet. We searched, brought in cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar, combed the forest around where the solarium had stood. Nothing. The cases are still open. They might never close. Ivy called me last month. She's 18 now, enrolled in college studying psychology. She wants to do what I do, wants to help other girls who got caught in the same trap. I tried to talk her out of it, told her this job will hollow you out if you let it, that you'll carry every victim you couldn't save for the rest of your life. But she just laughed. I'm already carrying them, she said. The 3 missing girls, the 12 in Radcliffe's photographs, Corinne Ashcroft. I'm carrying them just like you carry Inez Robles. The FBI Academy starts taking applications next month. Ivy's already filled out her paperwork. She asked me to write her recommendation letter. I did. I told them she's the strongest person I've ever met, that she's been to hell and walked back out carrying fire. They'll accept her. And in 4 years, she'll graduate and pin on her badge and start hunting monsters just like I do. For a brief moment, sitting at my desk with Ivy's recommendation letter still on my screen, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Contentment, maybe even happiness. The weight I've been carrying since I was 15 feels lighter. Not gone, never gone, but distributed, shared. Ivy will carry some of it with me, and maybe that's what survival really means, not carrying it alone. Then my phone rings. My supervisor is informing me about a recent incident. A woman had dialed 911 from a gas station payphone at dawn from Dayton. Her voice was barely a whisper, but the message was deafening. My name is Louisa McGregor. I was taken 7 years ago. I'm free. I got out. Then she said the words that made me grab my go bag. There are 2 more girls in the basement, and he's waking up. Local SWAT breached the house an hour ago. They got them out, all 3 alive. But now those women are sitting in a hospital room, blinking against the light, trying to remember who they were before the box. They need someone who speaks the language of survival, someone who can look them in the eye and say, "You did it. You broke the lid. I'm on a flight in 30 minutes." Because sometimes, after years of searching, someone escapes. Someone makes the call. Someone saves not just herself, but everyone trapped behind her. My name is Gemma Hollis. I was 15 when a man tried to erase me. I'm 31 now, and I spend my days making sure other girls find their way. Out. 1 box at a time. Story 3. There are certain crime scenes that stay with you. Not because of the violence, though, that's part of it, but because of what the violence reveals about the human capacity for rage, for calculation, for absolute ruin. My name is Cora Brennan. I've been a special agent with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit for 10 years. I've walked through houses where families were slaughtered. I've stood in fields where bodies were dumped like garbage. I've interviewed serial killers who described their crimes with less emotion than you'd use to order coffee. But the scene at the Ivory Room Bridal Boutique in Charleston, South Carolina, that was different. It was March 2019 when I got the call. Charleston PD had requested federal assistance on what they were calling a possible organized crime hit. A woman had been murdered at her workplace, and the surviving witness claimed it was a message killing tied to the mob. The Bureau sent me and my partner, Grayson Campbell, a senior agent, with 20 years in organized crime investigations. We'd been tracking a criminal organization called the Iron Syndicate for the better part of a decade. They operated primarily out of the southeast, running everything from drug trafficking to money laundering to contract killings. But they were careful, surgically careful. They didn't leave witnesses, they didn't leave messes, and they certainly didn't leave messages, which is why when Charleston PD called it a syndicate hit, I was skeptical. We arrived at the boutique around 10 p.m. The place was in the historic district, a beautiful storefront with French windows and delicate gold lettering on the glass. Inside, it looked like a scene from a horror movie. The victim's name was Riley Fairchild. She was 28 years old, worked as a seamstress and alteration specialist at the Ivory Room. She'd been with the boutique for about 18 months. By all accounts, she was good at her job, well liked by customers, a little quiet but friendly enough. Riley had been found in the back alteration room. She'd been stabbed 331 times with a pair of fabric shears. I need you to understand what 331 stab wounds means. It doesn't happen in a moment of panic. It doesn't happen in a fight. 331 times means the attacker kept going long after the victim was dead. It means they counted. It means every wound was deliberate. The room looked like someone had painted the walls with arterial spray, blood on the ceiling. Blood soaked into the carpet so deep it was pooling in the subflooring. Blood on the white wedding dresses hanging nearby, turning them into something out of a nightmare. The shears used in the attack were still on the floor, the blades bent from the force of the strikes. Grayson stood in the doorway, taking it all in. He'd seen plenty of violence in his career, but even he looked pale. "This wasn't business," he said quietly. "This was personal." The survivor was in the front office when we arrived. Her name was Hazel Merrill. She was the manager of the Ivory Room, 35 years old, married, no criminal record. When we walked in, she was wrapped in a blanket, shaking, talking to a victim advocate from Charleston PD. She had visible injuries. Her lip was split, her left eye was swollen shut. There were ligature marks on her wrists, deep and raw, consistent with being restrained with zip ties, and on her chest, visible through the torn fabric of her blouse, was a mark that made my stomach drop, a jagged X carved into the skin directly over her heart. I knew that mark. Grayson knew it too. It was the signature of the Iron Syndicate. They carved it into informants, into people who crossed them, into anyone they wanted to send a message about. It meant you talked to the wrong people. It meant you were marked for death. "Mrs. Merrill," I said gently, sitting down across from her. "I'm Special Agent Cora Brennan with the FBI. This is Agent Grayson Campbell. We need to ask you some questions about what happened tonight." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They said Owen owes them money. They said this is what happens to snitches." Owen Merrill was her husband. We'd run his name on the way over. Owen was a CPA, but not the kind who does your taxes. He was a money launderer, and a good one. He worked for high-level clients, moving money through shell companies and offshore accounts. And yes, one of his clients was the Iron Syndicate. "Who came here tonight, Hazel?" Grayson asked. "Two men, big. They wore masks, ski masks. They broke in through the back door around 7 p.m. I was in the office finishing paperwork. Riley was still in the alteration room, working late on a rush order. What did they say?" "They grabbed me first. zip-tied my hands, dragged me to the alteration room. Riley was there, and she screamed when she saw them. Hazel's voice cracked. They told me to watch. They said this is what happens when your husband steals from the syndicate. They said I needed to see it so I could tell Owen. And then? They made me kneel on the floor, tied me to the radiator, and then they started stabbing her. She broke down, sobbing into her hands. The advocate put an arm around her. I looked at Grayson. He was staring at Hazel with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Merrill," I said carefully, "the mark on your chest. When did they do that?" After Riley was, they cut my shirt open and carved it into me. They said it was so Owen would know they mean business. They said next time it'll be deeper. We took her statement, got her medical treatment, and put her in protective custody at a safe house. Then Grayson and I went back to the crime scene. The forensics team was already at work, photographing everything, collecting evidence, documenting the carnage. The lead forensic analyst was a woman named Audrey Blackwell, someone I'd worked with on previous cases. She was meticulous, brilliant, and she didn't miss details. "Audrey," I said, walking into the alteration room, "what are we looking at?" She was crouched near the body, examining something with a magnifying glass. "Honestly, Cora, I'm looking at a lie. That got my attention." "The syndicate didn't do this," Audrey said flatly. "This wasn't a hit." "Walk me through it," she stood, gesturing around the room. "First, the overkill. 331 stab wounds. Syndicate hits are efficient. 2 bullets to the head, maybe a throat slit if they're feeling dramatic. They don't waste time. This?" She pointed at the blood-soaked floor. "This took at least 20 minutes, probably longer. That's not how professionals work." "Maybe they were sending a message," Grayson said. "Then they're really bad at it," Audrey replied, "because everything else about this scene screams amateur hour." She led us to the back door. "They supposedly broke in through here, except look at the door frame. The damage is minimal. The lock wasn't picked or forced. It was unlocked from the inside. Someone let them in, or someone who already had a key opened it." Next, she showed us bloody footprints leading from the alteration room to the office and back. "Hazel said the 2 men were big, right? These prints are size 13 boots, men's work boots, except look at the tread pattern." I crouched down. The prints were clean, perfectly uniform. "No wear pattern," Audrey said. "These boots have never been worn outside, and we found the source." She held up an evidence bag containing a pair of large work boots, display boots from the storage room, used for groomsmen fittings. "Someone put these on inside the store and walked through the blood to make it look like men were here." My pulse was starting to pick up. "What about Hazel's injuries?" "Consistent with being struck and restrained. The zip ties were real, the ligature marks are real. But here's the thing." Audrey pulled out her tablet, showing me photos of Hazel's torn blouse. "This is the blouse she was wearing when she was found. Look at the blood saturation. The fabric was heavily stained, blood running in vertical lines from the neckline down to the hem. For blood to drip in that pattern," Audrey explained, "she had to be standing upright for an extended period while bleeding. If she was zip-tied to the radiator on the floor like she claimed, the blood would pool horizontally toward her ribs. This pattern only makes sense if she was standing up for at least 15 to 20 minutes while actively bleeding from the chest wound." "She was standing," I said slowly, "not restrained." "Exactly." Grayson was looking at the alteration room with new eyes. "The syndicate mark," he said. "Could she have done that to herself?" Audrey nodded. "It's shallow. Painful, but shallow. Someone with a high pain tolerance and a lot of motivation could absolutely carve that into their own chest, using a mirror for reference. And we found the knife in the trash, wiped clean." I walked back to the office, thinking through the timeline. Something wasn't adding up. "Audrey, pull the store's financials. I want to see the books for the last 6 months." It took 2 hours, but when the records came back, the picture got clearer. The ivory room was hemorrhaging money. Not from lack of business, they were booked solid for the next year, but from internal theft. Someone had been skimming from the register, writing fake refunds, creating phantom vendors and paying them for services never rendered. Over the past 9 months, Approximately $85,000 had been siphoned out of the business accounts, and all of it traced back to one person. Hazel Merrill. She was stealing from her own boutique, Grayson said, staring at the spreadsheets. Building an escape fund. Running from her husband, I added. Owen's a money launderer for the syndicate. If she was planning to leave him, she'd need money they couldn't trace, money he didn't know about. But if Hazel was stealing and Riley found out, we pulled Riley Fairchild's phone records, and there it was. Text messages to a contact saved as O. The number belonged to Owen Merrill. The messages went back almost a year. They started professional, questions about store inventory and scheduling. Then they got personal. Compliments, late-night conversations. Photos of coffee cups and sunsets with captions like, "Thinking of you." And then around the 6-month mark, it escalated. The messages became more frequent, more intimate. Photos sent late at night, explicit images, videos of each other and sometimes together, recording and re-recording themselves in different locations and in different positions. Hotel rooms, his car, the back office of the boutique after hours, even what looked like Hazel's own bedroom while she was out of town. Dozens of files, hundreds maybe, documenting an affair that had gone from emotional to physical to obsessive. The phone's gallery was full of them, evidence of a relationship that had consumed both of them completely. And then about 6 weeks ago, everything changed. Riley had sent Owen an image, a grainy ultrasound photo. The text below it read, "Ours. 6 weeks. I'm keeping it. We need to tell her. Owen's response came 3 hours later. "Not yet. Give me time. I'll figure it out." Riley's messages after that became more insistent, more desperate. She wanted him to leave Hazel, wanted them to be a family, wanted him to choose her and the baby. And in the most recent messages, dated a week ago, Riley had told Owen something that sealed her fate. "I know she's stealing. I found the fake invoices. I'm going to tell her to leave the business or I'll report her. Then we can be really together." I sat back, feeling the pieces click into place. Riley wasn't just having an affair, I said quietly. She was carrying Owen's child. She was trying to force Hazel out using the embezzlement as leverage so she could have the life she thought she deserved. Grayson stared at the ultrasound image on Riley's phone, and Hazel knew. She must have seen the messages, seen the ultrasound. Grayson finished. But Hazel hadn't just snapped. She'd done something much smarter, much colder. She'd murdered Riley, her baby, staged a fake mob hit, and framed it all as a warning to her husband. "She knew we'd investigate Owen," I said. "She knew we'd dig into his clients, his finances, his connections to the syndicate. She was using us to destroy him." Grayson pulled up Owen Merrill's file. "If the syndicate thinks Owen's under federal investigation, if they think he's cooperating, they'll kill him," I finished. She wasn't just covering up Riley's murder. She was signing Owen's death warrant. We arrested Hazel Merrill the next morning at the safe house. I'll never forget the look on her face when I walked in. She was sitting on the couch, drinking coffee, still playing the traumatized victim, when she saw me. She started to stand, started to put on the scared voice again. "Agent Brennan, have you found them? The men who—" "Sit down, Mrs. Merrill." Something in my tone stopped her cold. I laid out the evidence, the footprints that matched display boots from her own store, the blood pattern on her blouse that proved she'd been standing, not restrained, the financial record showing $85,000 in theft, Riley's phone showing the affair with Owen. I watched her face as the facade crumbled. "You didn't kill Riley because she found out you were stealing," I said quietly. "You killed her because she was sleeping with your husband, because she had the audacity to try to blackmail you into leaving him so she could have him." Hazel said nothing. 331 stab wounds. Do you know what that tells me? It tells me you weren't just angry. You were erasing her. Every wound was an insult. Every wound was a betrayal. You were erasing her face, her body, everything that made Owen want her instead of you. Her hands were shaking. But you didn't stop there, I continued. You carved the syndicate's mark into your own chest. You staged the whole scene to look like a mob hit. Because you knew we'd investigate Owen. You knew we'd expose his money laundering. You knew the syndicate would find out he'd brought federal attention to their operation. And you knew what they'd do to him. Hazel looked up at me then, and for the first time, I saw the real her. Not the scared victim, not the traumatized survivor. I saw a woman who'd lost everything and decided to burn the world down on her way out. He made me invisible, she said softly. I built that business from nothing. I worked 80-hour weeks. I made that place everything it was. And he used my money to sleep with a 28-year-old seamstress who thought he was going to leave me for her. So you killed her? I wanted her to understand. That's why I didn't stop. Every time the shears went in, I wanted her to know what it felt like to be erased, to be replaced, to be nothing. And Owen? She smiled. It was the coldest thing I've ever seen. Owen thought he was untouchable. He thought laundering money for the syndicate made him special, protected. I wanted him to know what it felt like to have that protection disappear, to be exposed, to be nothing. We charged Hazel Merrill with first-degree murder, evidence tampering, filing a false report, and a dozen other charges. The evidence was overwhelming. She was convicted and sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. But Hazel's plan worked better than she probably imagined. The news of the syndicate hit leaked before we could control it. The media ran with the story. A bridal boutique manager caught in the crossfire of organized crime. A warning killing tied to money laundering. The Iron Syndicate leadership saw the reports. They didn't know it was fake. They thought Owen Merrill had been sloppy, had exposed their operation, had brought the FBI to their doorstep. 3 days after Hazel's arrest, Owen was found in a motel outside Savannah. He'd been stabbed. The medical examiner counted the wounds. 331. The syndicate was sending their own message. They knew exactly what Hazel had done, and they were making sure everyone else knew too. Owen had been marked, judged, and executed in the exact same manner as Riley Fairchild. But Owen's death gave us something else. In his panic, knowing the syndicate was coming for him, Owen had tried to save himself the only way he could, by creating insurance they'd never see coming. He didn't reach out to prosecutors. That would have been a death sentence. Instead, he built a trail. We found the first piece in his motel room after his body was removed. A business card for a storage facility in Myrtle Beach, tucked inside a copy of the Bible in the nightstand drawer. Unit number written on the back in pencil, so faint you had to hold it at an angle to see it. The storage unit contained a single cardboard box. Inside was a laptop, password protected. The password hint read, "Where we got married." It took us 2 days to crack it. Hazel had mentioned in one of her early interviews that they'd gotten married at a courthouse in Beaufort. We tried every variation. Beaufort, the date, the address, the judge's name. Nothing worked. Then Grayson was scrolling back through Riley's messages to Owen, looking for anything we might have missed. He stopped on a photo Riley had sent about 2 months before her death. It showed a small white chapel, Spanish moss hanging from the oak trees surrounding it. The text below read, "I found the perfect place. St. Michael's in Bluffton. Please. I want to do this right. I want us to be a real family before the baby comes." Owen's response, sent 4 days later, "Okay." That was it. Just okay. We pulled the marriage records for St. Michael's Chapel in Bluffton, and there it was, dated 7 weeks before, Riley's murder. The password was St. Michael's. Inside the laptop were 10 years of meticulously documented files, spreadsheets showing every transaction Owen had ever processed for the syndicate, scanned invoices, wire transfer records, shell company registrations, names, dates, amounts, everything. But more than that, Owen had organised it like a tutorial. He'd created a folder structure that walked you through the entire money laundering operation step by step. How they moved cash, how they hid assets, how they paid off officials. He'd built a roadmap specifically designed for federal investigators who knew what they were looking for but not where to look. The syndicate never knew it existed. They killed Owen thinking they'd eliminated the leak. They had no idea he'd spent the last week of his life building a bomb with a delayed fuse. We raided the syndicate's operations 2 weeks later, seized $40 million in assets, arrested 37 people, including the Leadership Council. Matteo Crowley, the head of the organisation, was taken into custody at his estate outside Charleston. He's serving 4 consecutive life sentences now. The Iron Syndicate, the organisation we'd been chasing for a decade, was dismantled because a woman decided to murder her husband's mistress and blame it on the mob. I went to see Hazel in prison 6 months after her conviction. I needed to understand. She'd been moved to a high-security facility in Georgia. When they brought her into the interview room, she looked different, thinner, harder, like prison had stripped away whatever softness she'd been pretending to have. "Agent Brennan," she said, sitting down across from me. "I didn't think I'd see you again." "I have a question," I said. She waited. "Did you know it would work this well? Did you know we'd bring down the syndicate?" She thought about that for a moment. "I knew you'd investigate Owen. I knew his clients would find out. I thought maybe he'd go to prison. Maybe the syndicate would cut him loose, take their money, disappear. I didn't know they'd kill him the exact same way I killed her." She paused. "That was poetic. You used us," I said. "You used Riley's body as bait. You used the FBI as a weapon. You orchestrated the complete destruction of your husband and the entire criminal organization he worked for. I did what I had to do. You killed an innocent woman." Her expression didn't change. Riley wasn't innocent. She knew Owen was married. She knew what he did for a living. She chose to sleep with him anyway. And then she tried to blackmail me, tried to force me out of my own marriage so she could play house with a money launderer. She made her choice. And the 331 stab wounds. One for every day I was invisible. Every day I worked my business while he spent my money. Every day I smiled and played the good wife while he texted another woman. I was about to end the interview when something occurred to me, something that had been bothering me since I saw that ultrasound image. "Mrs. Merrill," I said, "did you want children?" She looked up at me, confused by the question. "What? Children? Did you and Owen ever talk about having kids?" Her expression hardened. Owen didn't want children. He said his life was too complicated, too dangerous with his clients. He made me get my tubes tied 5 years into our marriage, said it was safer that way. I felt my stomach drop. "Hazel, Riley was pregnant when you killed her. 6 weeks. Owen's baby." The colour drained from her face. For the first time since I'd met her, I saw the facade completely shatter. Her hands started shaking. Her breathing became rapid, shallow. "What?" She was carrying his child. There was an ultrasound image in their messages. She'd told him about it 6 weeks before the murder. He knew. They'd even gotten married in secret at a chapel in Bluffton so the baby wouldn't be illegitimate. Hazel stared at me like I'd just told her the world was ending. No, he didn't want kids. He made me... Her voice cracked. "He made me make sure we couldn't have children because he said it was too dangerous. He said he'd never bring a child into his world." "He lied," I said quietly. "He didn't want children with you, but he was willing to have them with Riley." She broke then. Completely. Her face crumpled and she started sobbing. The kind of deep, wrenching sobs that come from somewhere primal. The guard stepped forward, but I waved them back. "He took that from me," she whispered between sobs. "He made me give up the one thing I wanted most, and then he gave it to her. He gave her everything." "The baby was innocent," I said. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, mascara running in black streaks. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. I thought she was just some stupid girl who wanted to play house with my husband. I didn't know about the baby. I didn't know he married her. For a moment, sitting across from a woman who'd stabbed someone 331 times, I almost felt something like pity. Almost. Would it have mattered? I asked. If you'd known about the baby, would you have stopped? Hazel was quiet for a long time. Then she looked at me with those cold, broken eyes. What difference would it make now? She said quietly. It wasn't an answer. It was a door closing. A refusal to look at what she'd done. To acknowledge the innocent life she'd taken along with Riley's. Or maybe it was something worse. Maybe it was the truth. That knowing about the baby, knowing Owen had married Riley, knowing he'd given her everything Hazel had been denied. Maybe none of it would have changed what happened in that alteration room. Maybe she would have counted to 331 anyway. I left that interview with a cold feeling in my chest. Hazel Merrill wasn't insane. She wasn't a woman who snapped in a moment of passion. She was an architect. She'd built a cage for everyone she hated, locked them inside, and watched it collapse. Riley Fairchild died believing she was going to be with the man she loved. Owen Merrill died knowing his wife had orchestrated his murder from inside a prison cell. And the Iron Syndicate, an organization that had operated with impunity for 20 years, was brought down because they took the bait. 3 months into Hazel's sentence, I got a call from the warden at her facility. There'd been an incident. Hazel Merrill had been found in her cell. She'd been attacked during the night. No guards saw anything. No cameras caught it. No inmates reported anything unusual. She'd been stabbed. The medical examiner counted the wounds. 331. The syndicate has reach. Even from behind bars, even with their leadership in federal custody, they have reach. Someone inside that prison decided Hazel Merrill needed to understand what she'd set in motion, needed to experience exactly what Riley Fairchild experienced, needed to be erased the same way she'd erased others, stood in the morgue, looking at Hazel's body on the table. The wounds covered every inch of her torso. The sheer violence of it was overwhelming. Audrey Blackwell was there, reading the coroner's report. 331, she said quietly. Exactly. They were making a point. They always do. I've been with the FBI for 10 years, but I've never seen a domino effect like this. One woman's rage toppled everyone around her, piece by piece, until nothing was left standing. The ivory room closed. The building became a restaurant, but locals say the alteration room still feels wrong. That sometimes late at night you can hear scissors opening and closing. I don't go back to Charleston anymore, but sometimes I wake up thinking about that blood-soaked room and the woman who decided invisibility was worse than death. I hope I never see anything like it again.